I've made my disappointment clear about Glorious recently, but they have an opportunity to change things with their new Model D2 and O2 Pro line. Their recent releases have been lacking, and their best mice being restricted to group buys. The Model D2 Pro and O2 Pro aim to carry on with what made the Forge so exciting. Lightweight gaming mice designed for competitive gaming. These also have some exciting features that aim to compete against some of the best mice in the market. But it might not be so glorious for Glorious, as I've experienced some quality control issues with their previous releases. And with the competition being as tough as it's ever been, Glorious really cannot afford any mistakes. They've already made up for one mistake that was in their previous major releases, the Model i2 and O2, with the removal of the holes and RGB. I need to clear up some possible confusion first though. The Model O2 Pro is using the same shape as the original Model O. It is not using the Model O2 design, which is slightly different, which I don't think is a good thing, but I'll explain myself a bit later. Now that's out of the way, let's take a look at some of the changes that Glorious hope will bring it some success. This mouse has two versions. You get a standard 1000Hz wireless one, and one that supports up to 8000Hz on wired, with 4000Hz on wireless. These mice also featured new optical switches, so Glorious is continuing to throw everything at these mice to make them successful. I believe that these are the same optical switches that are used in other mice like the Lamzu Thorn and the Pulsar X2 V2. If I'm right, they're using ratio optical switches, and here's a quick sound test. I do have something to say about these switches which I'll get to soon, and I'll also go through some of the benefits that these mice have over the competition. Finally, there are no changes to the shapes of either of these from the original Glorious mice. For those of you unfamiliar with the old ones, both of these are for medium hand sizes. The Model D2 Pro is 128mm long, 67mm wide and 42mm tall, and is more suited towards palm grip. And the Model O2 Pro, which is 128mm long, 66mm wide and 38mm tall, which is better suited for fingertip and claw grip. I guess depending on the success of these releases will decide whether or not they'll release smaller versions like they did with the original. And these have all had a weight reduction, with these weighing between 57 to 62 grams. With all the juice that's being packed into these mice, you'd think that the performance would be pretty good, but that hasn't been the case. I've had issues with all four mice they sent me. The first example is a huge sensor skip, some random disconnects, with the mouse finally working after turning it off and on again, and another example of the sensor skipping. They would be fine as soon as I turn them on for about 10 minutes, and then the performance would degrade over time and they would eventually switch off. And I was baffled. I mean, what are the odds of 4 of the mice being faulty? I tried everything I could to fix it, reinstalling firmware, software, deleting System32, uninstalling drivers, and performing a satanic ritual, but nothing worked. So I reached out to Glorious. It turns out it was just a firmware issue. So they sent me the new versions and all of them work perfectly now. Or so I thought. Every so often I experience something similar to a spin out, where the mouse will suddenly behave like it's aim locking to a ghost or something. But it's important to remember that sometimes the reviewers get a pre-production unit. Often we aren't getting the final product, we are getting the version before the final product, so these mistakes can happen. What's important though is if this continues, and these issues are found on the retail releases. Having said that, if I had a retail version of this product, I would be giving Glorious a lot more stick for this. With that wrapped up, let's go back to the review. My previous experience with the original Model O and Model D wasn't exactly great, as the build quality wasn't up to standard. And thankfully there's been a massive improvement on these Pro 2 versions. The side buttons and scroll wheel feel really nice to use, the coating is a soft matte finish, and there's no flex or rattle to these mice at all. I wish they used the newer Model O2 design for the O2 Pro as it had sidewalls to rest your fingers on, but I guess Glorious went back to what originally made them popular. One other downside isn't actually the fault of Glorious, that is if they're using the switches that I think they are. These optical switches I find feel really hollow, and it's starting to be a noticeable downside in other high quality mice and this one. With all these improvements, it was no surprise to me that I enjoy playing with these mice. When the performance issues were resolved, they were fantastic to use, which is something that I don't normally say about Glorious mice. There's extra benefits over some other manufacturers as well. You get a 2-year warranty as standard, and you get usable software which isn't total garbage, but it still has some bugs. And also it has a DPI button. Look at that beautiful thing. The standard versions cost around about $100, with the 4K 8K version costing around $130. I'd recommend getting the standard version, as I still don't think increased polling rates is worth it at the moment for most people. So Glorious have done it. They've made a series of good products without fumbling it like they did with their previous mice. Considering how tough the competition is these days, Glorious have done a very good job of reaching the same level as the competition in the same price bracket. And I'll be very honest, I didn't think that would happen. I never thought I would actually be recommending you to buy Glorious mice. Now you've chosen your mouse, there's a video on screen now that should help you pick a mousepad and keyboard.